Hello and welcome to the Afri-Dominion Show. My name is Freeman, Singirankabo, and thank you so much for joining our program today. Those of you joining us live from whichever platform that you are using, whether it be via television stations, radio stations, or social media, welcome, and we are very glad that you have joining us. In particular, those of you joining us live from social media, such as Facebook or YouTube, we are so glad that you have joining us, that you are joining us today. And I also want to take this opportunity to ask that you please share this content. Be sure to subscribe, follow, and even click on that little button that has a ring on it. You may be asking why, so that you may have an opportunity to join us live here at the studio as we share with you the programs that we have prepared for today on Friday. And I want to also bring the attention to each and every one of you who are not familiar with this new program, Afri-Dominion, so you may have a chance or an opportunity to get to know what is Afri-Dominion. So let me just give you a little brief of what the program is about for those of you who do not know about this brand new program that we recently launched. And before I get to it, I want to also give a huge thanks to HMG Network and the affiliates who are making this broadcast a reality. You know that broadcast, it's a tough business, and there are very few stations worldwide who actually carry on some of the most important messages, of which are not necessarily mainstream media messages. And so we are so grateful and super excited to have an opportunity to appear in front of you guys today and join us today live as it happens. So what is Afri-Dominion? Afri-Dominion, it's an idea that inspires, advocates, and encourages a complete take back of Africa Dominion, one country at a time, for the interests of African people, primarily, and the rest of the world, secondly. Now you may be wondering, okay, how is that possible exactly? We believe that Africa as a continent must be led, must be managed by its sons, daughters, and African descendants who actually care for the continent and its people. And that's why we stress that this is an advocacy. This is an inspiration. And we are literally encouraging each and every one of you, sons, daughters, and African descendants, to take charge of the whole entire Africa. For our own interest, primarily. Africa has more than enough resources to feed the entire planet Earth. However, most of our people are extremely poor. So this show, we are going to be showcasing relevant issues, very close to your hearts, issues that you care about, daily basis issues that will never or barely make it all the way to those mainstream media programs. So we want you to come here and speak up on behalf of the voiceless, our brothers and sisters in your communities, in your villages, in your countries, and on the continent. And so you can expect here in this conversation, on this show, on this program, that we are going to be very frank. We are going to speak frankly about all the issues. We are going to speak boldly about all the issues. And we are absolutely going to speak without any apologies to those issues of which we care so deeply about. And it is in this spirit that we are going to be speaking to all of you. Especially that everything that you will hear, it's all in the spirit of truth, love, and trust. And these are the benchmarks by which we expect and we would love for you to measure both the integrity and the content or the value of the content that we are going to be sharing with you. And with that in mind, I also would, it would be remiss if I didn't ask each and every one of you to please feel free to pass on some feedbacks. We would love to get some feedbacks from you. in particular or specifically to any and all the shows or different programs that you will get to hear from here on Afri-Dominion show. And we also want you to take action. Take action on these issues. Be an active participant. Don't just sit back and listen and then kumbaya. And so with that in mind, we want to bring you to the, we want you to visit our website. We want you to visit our website, or a place where we can actually bring all the programs together, all the communication together. Each and every one of you should get an opportunity to check out what is it that we're involved in. How can you be a part of it, especially if it's at all in the interest of you, your families, your communities, your villages, your country, and the continent. So the website that you can find more information on our program, it is www.afrodominion.com. www.afridominion.com. It's Afri, not Afro. Afridominion.com. The email that you can reach us at, it's info@afridominion.com. info@afridominion.com. Be sure to check out the website, and also we would very much love for you to join our group, our social group. You can definitely find us on social media. That's fine. But we also want to be able to have that intimate connection with you. So join our Telegram group. You will find information on the website. Come and hang out with us. Come and find out those who are actually going through day-to-day operations, what's happening, those who are continuing to keep tabs and to keep us informed and to provide all the amazing information relevant to these issues. And we want you to be fully communicated and fully equipped with the tools necessary to handle the most important issues that we want to bring to light. And with that in mind today, I want to let those of you who are actually tuning in for the very first time, Afri-Dominion, it's a huge idea, it's a huge concept. So we've taken it upon we've taken it, we've put it into context of breaking it down into different themes. This show passes by every Monday through Friday. So Mondays through Fridays, we have one theme that we sort of focus on. So on Mondays, we focus on refugee. We have such a huge problem in Africa when it comes to refugees. There's no reason why Africans themselves should be refugees within the continent of Africa. Let's get rid of the root cause why the people are becoming internally displaced refugees, and then we make changes of this lifestyle. We make changes of the living conditions, because it's a huge epidemic in Africa. Not to mention that now Africans are actually even moving outside of the continent, and most of them, they're dying on their way to the rough journey. And it is just not fair that this keeps on happening on the continent, which is the most rich. It's one of the richest continent on planet Earth, period. So much natural resources, of which is benefiting the rest of the continent primarily, instead of Africa and its African people. So we want to make sure that we advocate for these changes. And these are great changes which we believe each and every one of you can take part of in making it all happen. On Tuesdays, we talk about the Constitution, law, policy reviews, and implementation. Again, African countries have most of the modern, well-written constitutions on papers, but they are never followed. We have some of the best policies, but they do not have the best interests of the people. We have laws, regulations. We have so many things well put, but the majority of it, it's actually not in the best interest of the African people. So we want to have an opportunity to actually dissect, scrutinize these laws, these policies, this constitution, and advocate for changes where necessary, bluntly speaking. On Wednesdays, we talk about our testimony, our history as African people. It's unconscionable that Africa, as old as it is, Today, when we talk about its history, especially in the developed countries, you have things like African history, the African Month history or Black African History Month and things like that. 12 months out of a year, 1 month specifically for the African people, for the African history and all of that. When you have been living for thousands and thousands of years, we want to make sure that we revive our history. We rewrite our history, most of which have been deeply buried. But we have such a rich history, but the fact that we are ignorant about it, it's also part of the cause, a part of the consequences that we are living with today. Consequently, most of us, we do not know who we are as a people. So we want to have an opportunity to make changes when it comes to our history. We want you to sit down and be the driver of your own testimony. Sit down and be the driver of your own history. Write your own history your own way with no apologies to nobody. And that's what you can expect on Wednesdays. On Thursdays we talk about the spirit of dominion. As we have said, the spirit of dominion entails leadership, governorship, ruling, controlling the continent of Africa and its natural resources, all in the benefit of African people primarily and the rest of the world. Like I said when I first started, Africa as a continent is it's stinking rich, it's stinking wealthy. But the wealth of Africa has been plotted outside of, it's been plotted going outside of the continent, and most of it's going out. It does not benefit the people. So we want to make sure that we actually put mechanism to keep that from happening. The reason why most of African people are fleeing or they leaving Africa is because there's nothing, they don't see anything of value to their day-to-day lives, to their lifestyle. So they go elsewhere where they see added value. So we want to say, be the value making of your own country, of your own people. Be an added value to yourself, to your family, to your community, and so forth. But if we don't know that we are actually valuable, we won't be able to know any better. We will be going outside of the continent where you get treated cheaply, less than animals most of the time, where you get stigmatized. And we want to put an end to that as a people. And it all starts with us. On Fridays, we get to talk about what's been talked about throughout the week. And this is not necessarily the mainstream media news talk or things like that. It could also be issues of which have not actually came on the radar. So we want you to be involved. We want you to let us know, what do you care most about in your communities? What would you like to put a sunlight, to put a light to it so we can actually pay attention to it as a people? But also those whose interest is to push Africa out of poverty back to its wealthiest standard or status it should be having. And we all get to say that you sons and daughters and African descendants are the driving forces behind these initiatives. You are the kings and queens, naturally. That's who you are as a people. So make sure that you assume your position and assume your responsibilities and take back the full dominion of Africa. And with that in mind, I want us to get started on our current events and the impact towards Africa and African people, and also how we can take action towards some of these issues. So what's been happening in Africa? Most of you, especially a lot of countries, are crying today for various reasons. But one of the things that we want to talk about today is actually the warfare in African countries and its impact to the people. That's one of the biggest topics we want to talk about. The second topic is going to be COVID-19 and its consequences in Africa and towards African people. And then the last topic we want to talk about is building back Africa. These are huge topics that you can talk about for years and years to come. So we would not be pretending to be experts in these topics, but we want to make sure that we bring them to your attention so that when you're sitting down one-on-one with each other, you can actually say, hey, I actually do care about these issues myself. This is what we can do about this issue or that issue, and so on. And I literally would love so much that you young people in Africa, you really take seriously your lives. We live in such an amazing season for African and African descendants, even the rest of the world. But in particular, Africa has the youngest population in the whole entire world. Which means in the years to come, 10, 20, 30, 40 years, Africa is going to be the driving force of the entire planet, whether everybody else like it or not. So if you will be the driving force, you must be able to prepare yourselves. You got to put some things in place so that, that just won't be figuratively speaking. You have to be such a force as you truly are, as you naturally are, and put that in action. You have to be an added value to yourselves, your families, your countries, the continent, and the rest of the planet. But we cannot do this if we are distracted. And the last we checked, Africans are super distracted. Most Africans, let me not say all Africans, most Africans are distracted. We are distracted in the things of which has zero importance in your lives, except making you feel good for 5 seconds. And then afterwards, you go and do God knows what. So going back to warfare in African countries and its impact, I have a few questions that I've been wrestling around with, and I'd like to just put it on the table so that you can also have a saying in it. One of the questions when it comes to the warfare in African countries is what is the primary reason Africa continues to have deadly wars on its soil? Why is it that Africa continues to actually feed wars? Why is warfare such a prime thing that everybody talks about in Africa? Young people, you ought to know what's happening and why is it currently Africans are dying in millions in these wars. Second question, who keeps tabs of the death toll and who will be responsible for these deaths? In any war, people die. This is not a video game. You have people die, infrastructure destroyed, livelihood completely decimated, internally displaced people, so many things, literally so many things take place and so many things happen consequently. And I want to know, what's the death toll? What is the death toll of these people? What is the death toll of African people in these wars? And who is going to actually be responsible? Is it you who's shooting one another? Is it a government that's going to be responsible? Is it the stakeholders, the hidden stakeholders, or the invisible stakeholders pushing for these wars nonstop? Who is going to be responsible? You will not be able to know any of those answers or look for them if you actually do not sit down and open your eyes and see what's happening on the continent. Another question, who is benefiting from these wars? Believe it or not, wars are one of the biggest products. The most companies, most corporates globally invest in. You'll be shocked how many companies selling weapons, high-end weapons, globally, in particular in Africa right now. So who's benefiting from these wars? Can you actually name the companies that your government is purchasing the weapons from? The procurement using your own tax dollars that you will never get to know about. Secret deals being utilized. Meetings. So many meetings about where to purchase weapons, where to get the expertise, there's so much going on. If you check out the news and find out how is it that the rest of the continent knows, they keep tabs on these wars, who's taking what in Africa, who has a strategic advantage in Africa here and there. What is this country doing in Africa? What is that country doing in Africa? There is a tendency that any one of the so-called G5 countries, the G5, it's the, let me not even say it, go Google it, G5. These are the most, it's usually like the most developed 5 countries in industry-wise, powerful. So when you realize like the Horn of Africa has these special envoys, you've got Chinese, you have the United States, you have UK, you have France, you have Germany, you have Russians, you have the Australians. You've got all these G5 countries running the show in Africa. They say we have these agreements, military studies, agreements, military cooperations with African countries to fight against terrorism and so on. Who is benefiting from these wars? How is it that you never get to know about when the war starts and when it ends? Why is it happening under your watch as a people? So we want to be able to talk about that, and you have a saying in it. Another question, how many internally displaced people have left their homes and their livelihoods? In any wars, everybody you flee. Nobody wants to die willingly. These wars displace people, which is why we say that we are advocating for an end of refugees in Africa and stateless people. You have so many people who have become stateless. How does a citizen become a stateless person? It's basically undocumented person who literally is like a nobody. You can take advantage of them, you can kill them, you can do whatever with them. Because nobody's going to ask, nobody barely will care. And we have plenty of them living in 2022 throughout Africa. So why is it that you can be happy, you're sleeping on your own nice bed or however it is you sleep at home, but someone else can't even find a place to sleep? They're docking day in and day out because their lives are in danger. And we become ignorant towards these very facts. So I'm asking you, have you bothered to find out how many people, how many displaced people are there? How many refugees, internally displaced refugees are there? How many are going outside of the continent consequently? I also want to ask you, where are the weapons coming from responsible for these wars and death in Africa? You have manufacturers of weapons, some of the biggest and the worst weapon that the humankind has ever manufactured, have ever created, are being tested on the African people in Africa. Where are these weapons coming from? How is it that you, as a regular folk, allow a weapon to come and be tested in your backyard with all type of chemicals, with long-term consequences, health-wise environmental wise, and all of that. And you still allow that to happen. Africa as a continent is one of the biggest test grounds for weapons, for the latest gadgets in weaponry. All under your watch, but you are super ignorant about it. So where are these weapons coming from? Which one of the industry, which manufacturer, which company is bringing weapons to Africa? And its impact towards African people, African ways of lives, and so on. Another thing to talk about or to ponder about, if we take case in point, currently, most of you have heard the Ethiopian war in the Tigray region. Have you cared or have you bothered to know why is happening there in Tigray region or Tigray region? You Ethiopians, you can actually tell us better. You can give us the most in-depth knowledge about it. We read about it, we research about it, we attempt to keep tabs on what's happening. But why is it really happening there? Most of you, if you didn't know, Ethiopia is one of those nations that has never been colonized. It actually managed to keep its history, to maintain its culture for thousands of years. But now it's pretty much a lab of warfare. Constant wars, taking many lives, countless lives of Ethiopians, and millions of displaced refugees within and outside of Ethiopia. Why is this happening? Who will be taking responsibility of the death toll, of the death in Ethiopia? The infrastructure destroyed and all of that. Now, Ethiopia is one of many countries that currently have wars going on. And these wars are not just, they just haven't started, as in like yesterday. Most of it has been going on for years and years and years. Look, Uganda and Sudan. Most of you don't know that there is wars. Constant wars in Uganda and Sudan as another example. Look at the entire Sudan being sliced into two countries, Sudan and South Sudan. But the Sudanese say we are still one people. But under what type of interest did Sudan get sliced into half? Why is it that there is a continuous war? Why are the people why are they keeping these wars? Why are they keep feeding these wars? Why do these wars continue? People are dying in thousands. People are dying in millions. And you don't hear about it in the United Nations, the Security Councils and all of that. What's going to happen with that? Talk about COVID-19 consequences also. The death toll. What are the consequences of COVID-19? Now it's 2 years and counting? What's been happening with COVID-19 consequently? What's the death toll right now in Africa? What is the food situation in Africa? What is the livelihood like right now in Africa? What is the impact of lockdown in Africa? How is that affecting African ways of lives? I want you all to ponder and find out about that and have a chance and opportunity to talk about it. Lastly, when it comes to building back Africa, the question is, where are the Africans and African descendants in effort to build Africa? We are so quick to leave Africa. Obviously, nobody wants to live under warfares, granted. But at what point do you actually say enough is enough? I am willing, I'm going to stick it. And I'm going to stay here and fight and make these changes. Push back salesmen, gun salesmen, weapon salesmen, so that these weapons do not come on your territory. Enact laws, regulations, put it in the Constitution to ban weapons so that your country can have some sort of peace, so you may have an opportunity to think of other things. So these are the questions that I brought in today. And as you can see, there's so many of them, and in only 90 minutes, we will not be able to talk about even a fraction of it. But I want you all to think about it and actually ponder. So going back to my first question that I have asked you, what is the primary reason why Africa continues to have deadly wars on its soil? Let me put in perspectives. Here in the United States, which is where I'm based, when was the last time you heard a war here in the United States? The United States has the biggest weapon manufacturer, globally probably. All the weapons that they have, how is it that you just don't see any wars on the United States soil or any of the United States territory? Yet they are the biggest weapon manufacturers. I want you to ask yourself those questions. Every year, you look at the budget, look at how much money selling weapons. Look how much money these big corporations are making. Go on Wikipedia. It's one of the best resources that I have found so far that actually can give you a list of the biggest weapon seller, both manufacturer and weapon seller globally. And look at the rankings. Look at the United States and the rest of the countries. If there is no wars, if you don't find any wars on the United States soil, yet they can sell the biggest, they can outsell most of these other countries when it comes to weapons. Where are these weapons going? How is it that they actually continue endlessly to find clients to use these brand new weapons? It's probably the biggest drug, better than opioids. Wars feed so many companies, pocket-wise, money-wise. So you young people in Africa, or whatever country that you're in, even globally in these countries, I want you all to start wondering, what is it that we're doing to this planet? What is it that we're doing to the African people? Africa is literally being destroyed environmentally, but also on its own human capital, the very, very primary resource, the humans. The people are being killed every single day as a result of these wars. And the question is, if I know that I'm going to be fighting you, and the weapon I'm using is not shooting beans, is not shooting food, is not shooting some life prolonging pills, it's actually shooting a bullet that's going to end your life. What are you thinking as a people? How is it that countries have the biggest budget to buy the biggest weaponry to fight one another or to use against its own people? Most of this country cannot feed their own population, but they have enough budget to buy all kinds of new weapons. It gets better. Some of the companies, some of the corporations would actually freely give you a weapon, free of charge. And they would just be like, it's on credit. You can take 100 years to just pay us back. And if you can't, let's discuss other alternative ways that you can use, to give back what we have given you. And guess what? We fall for it. For years, we've fallen for that. Young people, if your country doesn't manufacture a weapon, and you have the latest M16, you have the latest Karchenkov, you have the latest laser guided weapon you can find on the market, yet you cannot afford buying a 1 kilogram of rice and beans. What is wrong with that picture? What is wrong with that picture? You have access to weaponry, but you don't have access to food. You can go and kill your very next neighbor over whatever. It could be land, it could be something silly, and you terminate their lives. Yet you cannot actually take the same initiative and go build your neighbor who's hungry, who needs a hand, doing something else positive with their lives. This is our own fault. We are to blame in this game, guys. We are to literally blame in this game. And that's why we say here, it is about time that all of us collectively starting, we must scrutinize what is it that we're doing. Whose bids are we actually running for? Whose interests are we looking after? Is it our own interests as a people, or is the outsider? I will go back to the same question. The United States, the United Kingdom, France, Russia, Germany, China, they all manufacture weapons. In their own countries, they do not have any wars right now as we speak, right now. So if the expertise is manufacturing weapons, and their country do not have any wars, who becomes the client of these weapons? And they make sure that every single year they keep wars going, they instigate. There is an instigation of wars. There is silly fights amongst ourselves. And they all sell on both sides. They do not care as long as money keeps on going. And you don't have to have money. You could have other resources. You could use your natural resource as a means of exchange with these weapons. So we got to put an end to that. Again, how many people have died thus far? Do we have an organization that actually keep tabs of the death toll of these Africans, brothers and sisters, these kings and queens dying as a result of these wars? Can we hold these governments accountable? Every time a war starts, someone is going to die. It could be your brother, it could be your sister, it could be your dad, your mom, your cousin, your uncle, your auntie. But most of the children of these leaders will never go to wars. If they're in wars, they are upstairs in one of these buildings, super secured, not on the field, telling you where you're gonna get, where you may go get and end your life. So why can you not see that wars are not in the best interest of African people, period? We must be able to set up laws against weapon selling on the African continent, policies against weapon sales on the African continent, because these weapons are killing your children, our own family members, and nobody cares. You will not hear that on any one of these mainstream media. You won't hear that at the security concert in New York. You certainly won't hear that at the African Union conferences. You have people looking after the very best interests of companies all over the world selling weapons in Africa. Most of those people are within your governments. They're bidding for these companies. They're bidding for these multinational government agencies. Instead of looking after your best interest, they're looking after the best interest of these outsiders. And that's not the primary purpose of them being in those seats. But if you do not check them, if you do not ensure that they're doing exactly what you want them to do, what you intended them to do in those seats, this won't stop. But we want to put a stop to it. And we're asking you to join us to put an end to that. This is going to be an African effort. Young people, we're talking about you. Those of you who have yet to join any of these organizations. Those of you who are going to be tomorrow's leaders. Learn how to look after the interests of your own people primarily. And then look after the interests of the rest of the world. Because if you do not look after your own interests first, nobody else is going to do that. So again, I am so looking forward to find out who is going to be responsible of the millions and millions and millions of people dying as a result of these wars. Is it possible that we can actually sue some of these companies selling weapons in Africa? So there is a saying here in the United States that guns don't kill people, people kill people. If you've never heard of that, I want you to think of it. They say some of the weapon salespeople or companies that manufacture weapons, they say, you know what? We're not responsible, so don't look at us. We handed you the gun. You killed your own people. We are not responsible for what's happening here. People kill people. Our gun didn't kill people. You killed your own people. Every time I hear those narratives, it irks me. It makes me feel angry some way, because when you realize that I can actually give you poison, and I can completely run away from any of the responsibilities of the consequences of that poison. So if I have an industry that manufactures poison, then I make sure that you and your brother, you and your sister, you and your family members are quarreling. And I can be like, you know what, Johnny? I got something that can solve your problem. Here you go sleep this in. Johnny takes it and go and feed it to his family members. While Johnny did the act, I provided the means. How is it that I can say, I'm sorry, people kill people, poison don't kill people, you killed your own people? Just think about what's been happening every single day. So young people, guilty by association, you know what that is in these countries. You're found with some drugs. One of your friends has drugs on them. A police officer stops you on the road. All of you in that same vehicle, you are going to be booked. What they call guilty by association. How is it that we have yet to see guilty by association when it comes to the consequences of the wars in Africa? Where we can literally go after these big companies, these governments, every single country that manufactures weapon, and its weapon end up in African village somewhere, and it kills people. How is it that you have yet to say that, you know what, this weapon came from the United States, this weapon came from UK, this weapon came from France, this weapon came from Germany, this weapon came from China, Russia, even South Africa manufactures weapon. Just so that you know, we know some of our own people doing that as well. How is it that we cannot call them to account for the consequences of what's happening? If your government is seeking peace, how is it that you have the biggest pile of weaponry or weapon waiting to be utilized against the people, not even against the neighbors. Guys, think. We must be able to see what's happening and realize this is not in our very best interest. Africa is in debt. If you look at the debt that's accrued just from weapon reselling, look at how many countries have the latest weapon on credit. The kind of debt that actually can outlive me and outlive my children and my grandchildren and my great-great-grandchildren. That's the new code name for modern slavery. Living on credit, living beyond your means. This time, living beyond your means just destroying your own people. It's like on one side you're killing your people, on another side you're digging yourself in a hole, in a financial hole that you will never come out, that your children will never come out, your children's children will never be able to come out. At what point do we put a stop to this? This is a task that you young people, together we must start tackling. Not caring at who's to blame, no. But we need to stop the bleeding first and foremost. And we need to take action, measurable actions. We cannot do this if you're busy playing a video game. You cannot do this if you're busy just doing so many other things of which are not valuable or benefit or beneficial to you. This is why we openly say we are unashamedly pushing, inspiring, asking, just telling all of you, advocating, encouraging all of you to take back control of the Africa affairs, your own affairs as a people. Take back control of Africa as a continent. Take back control of your own countries. You young people, as messed up as your country could be, as messed up as your region could be, as messed up as your village could be, as messed up as your family could be, sit down and realize, hey, how do we stop this bleeding business? How do we stop it from continuing to take place? What do we need to do to just put a stop to it first and foremost? And then how do we pinpoint and actually eradicate or destroy, terminate the source of the problem? If you do not ask these questions, and frankly speaking, and boldly speaking, and unashamedly speaking, we are still going to be talking about this 200 years from now. Issue with corruption. Wars, corruption always seem to go hand to hand together. I'll give you another example. In the Democratic Republic of the Congo, one of the wealthiest countries on planet, with natural resources beyond what you can do with, beyond what you can use with potential that is unlimited. Today in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, you have millions of people who have died. We're talking about millions, not thousands, millions of people who have died. It's been a long time. It's been such a long time that these people, they die the same way a cockroach can be killed in your kitchen cabinet. And nobody cares. Do you know one of the countries that have played a huge role in it? It's a little tiny country called Rwanda, and I happen to have been. I was born in Rwanda. I come from Rwanda. Do you know that Rwanda has had a huge negative impact towards the Democratic Republic of the Congo? It used to be called Zaire. I am not proud when I say these things, but that's the reality. Do you know the government that's been responsible for part of those millions of people? The government that today you are credited for this being Singapore of Africa. Do you know the president who is responsible for these deaths? Because of the policies and the leadership, Paul Kagame. By you young people all over Africa, you know Paul Kagame as one of the agents of change, one of the biggest Pan-Africanism. Because that's how it's being spinned. You will never get to know the budget of Rwandan stockpile of weapons. How many weapons go through Rwanda and then dispatched throughout Africa? How many military operations from these big nations take place, and Rwanda is the middleman making all that happen? Paul Kagame's administrations, his administration making all this happen. He's become an expert in making these war deals. Recently in Mozambique, the Central African Republic. Some of these things, young people, they're taking place, yet none of you ask, what are the consequences, both short-term and long-term? The death toll, these families losing their own, their loved ones daily. What do you tell them? What did this government tell them? What did these presidents tell them? What did this prime minister tell them? What do you have to say to them? Guys, we gotta check ourselves. We have to check ourselves. So much is happening right underneath of your nose that you will never get to know if you do not smell what's right underneath of your nose and actually care enough to want to do something about it. Just yesterday, I was talking to someone from Ethiopia, and I'm telling you the truth. We were discussing about the dam that's being built, the Nile, the Blue Nile and the White Nile, and the wars going on in Ethiopia, and how many people have been dying. And he was like, man, I love your country. I love Rwanda and the way Paul Kagame has turned around things. And he went on and he told me how he wishes that every single country would have President of Rwanda, Paul Kagame, as one of those people to lead the country. And I just had to find a mask and put it on my mouth, because I was like, let me just shut up. Let me just listen and shut up first and listen up. So I was thinking, like, does this guy actually know what's been happening for the past 27 years in Rwanda? Does this guy actually know what's been happening in the Democratic Republic of the Congo for these past 27 years? Does this guy know what's happening on any of the country that Rwanda is involved in militarily? He certainly knows what the mainstream media has projected, what the lobbyists have projected. Anywhere you go, visit Rwanda on Arsenal. Visit Rwanda tourism-wise. Rwanda is being marketed just like the best product you can market everywhere. It's called marketing, guys. Look right underneath of the nose. Look right underneath of what's happening in Rwanda. Take a close attention. Scrutinize what's happening. And then compare and contrast. These wars all over Africa. What is the relationship of these wars and our leaders? Have you heard of something they call African? What is African? Have you heard of something they call terrorism in Africa? What is that, young people? We hear of these words being tossed around every single day, but you do not dive deeper to know more about it. And I am asking you to please take some time and learn these things in 2022. So much is changing. That is going to have an impact on your lives today and tomorrow. And it's up to you to actually make the changes. Shift the agenda. Own the agenda of your own lives, of your own ways of lives. Do not let outsider come in and tell you how to live your own lives at home, and then get to tell you how to live your lives in their homes. Just think about that. Again, this is not discrimination, because I want to make it clear to all of you watching and listening, and who will be watching these programs. We want to raise the awareness of humanity, of Ubuntu. We want to raise that awareness. We want to raise the awareness of your own life, the value of your life. We want you to care of your life and our lives, and our families' lives, the same way other countries are caring, or at least pretending to care. If the United States haven't had any wars, there has been some sort of stability for 240 plus years. They can actually think, they can actually sit down, they can actually innovate, they can come up with so many things that you who are fighting right now would never be able to come up with if you keep on fighting using their weapons. So I am asking you to say no to buying weapons that is going to be killing your own brother, your own sister. Whether it be purchased from the United States, UK, France, Germany, China, Russia, South Africa, any of these countries that are primarily manufacturing weapons. Say no, young people, say no. Through legislations, through laws, through policies, say no. Speak up against it. Speak up. Talk about your stories, how it's killing you, how it's killing your families, your livelihood. Speak up. But until then, we will not be able to put an end to this, because advertisers do a very magnificent job creating a facade of what Africa is, what ways of life is, what's happening, and who's the villain and who's the good guy. And it's about time that you actually go and scrutinize and see the validity of everything that's being projected in front of you. So go and learn and find out from the questions that I have asked you. I will post them on the description. Who's benefiting? What are the companies doing? Have they cared enough to send some medicine to actually help those people who have had consequences because their weapons have been killing people in Africa? Have they cared to actually educate those in camps for 20, 30, 40, 50 years? Have they cared to build some sort of normalcy in their lives? A little home where you can actually live and have a warmth with your child, with your baby child. Have they cared? What about you? Do you care enough to get rid of these shittings? These are campsites. Families living in a camp. Little teeny 6x6 camp. They have no sanitary means to take care of themselves. They live a pretty bad life for years after years after years after years. On the flip side, you can see some of the most wealthiest people walking on the planet, be it Africans or the rest of the nations, benefiting from these wars, benefiting from the death, benefiting from the rest of the brothers and sisters being misplaced. what are we doing to ourselves? How is tomorrow going to be like if we continue living like this? Let me move on to COVID-19 because this topic has taken so much. How many people have died so far in Africa because of COVID-19? I wonder if you guys know. Let me actually humor you because I do have, I can give you the digits quickly. I can actually give you some numbers. So far, coronavirus has, we have 301 million cases, more than 300 million. More than 301 million. It's actually 301, 636,217 thus far. This thing has claimed close to 5.5 million people. And the recovery, at least close to 258 million people have recovered. So, out of 301 million plus, 5.5 have died, and 257 millions are okay today. And you know, today we are pushing for vaccination. We are imposing people to vaccinate, to do so many things, and there's little education to it. And it always perplexes me. How is it that before, coronavirus, Africa has had the time to educate its people on the most amazing vaccinations? Things like polio. There's so many diseases that we have vaccinations for today, of which are amazing, and they've taken the time to educate the people. They have taken the time to tell the world, the Africans, how this affect them. But today, surprisingly and very perplexingly, how is it that in just 2 years, in the history of mankind, the whole entire planet is pushing for vaccination on a disease that has yet been to be fully researched, fully understood, short and long-term consequences not documented, yet we're pushing for vaccination. Where? Do take the ratio, guys. If you have 350 of them have problems and 250 are okay, what is the ratio when it comes to the death toll or those who are able to survive? That means 1 out of 6 of the people have died. Is it? No, I'm actually lying. Let me do the proper math before you guys actually tell me that I am misleading you. Sometimes I'm not good in math, especially when I'm talking too much. So we have 5. Okay, now we got it. Almost 2%. Imagine. So 1.6% have been dying, which means 98%. There's a recovery of close to 98%. And the scientists that we have globally are encouraging all of us to vaccinate, which is amazing, which is fantastic. However, on a disease that they have fully came to understand. Why can they exhaust the research, make sure that these things are very safe, and give it to us all? That way we have both short-term consequences and long-term consequences available. Another one thing that I want to bring to your attention: how is it that both the government and private manufacturers and private solution providers have completely taken zero liabilities on the consequences, both short-term and long-term, when it comes to COVID-19? Now in Africa, Rwanda is one of the biggest countries. That's at least 80% its people have been vaccinated, according to the report. So if we are vaccinating our own people by force, I should add, because most of these people, if you have no idea why you're being vaccinated, except a 30-minute soundbite that's been given to you as a presentation on a life, you're being vaccinated, you're being educated for as little, you've been given the information in such way that you don't have enough to make a decision on your life. A 30-minute decision for a lifetime consequence. Can you imagine? Can you think? Can you see? Whose best interest is it that all of this take place the same way, or the way it's taking place? I am for vaccination 100%. I am for educating our people 1,000%. Why is it that the education part of it is lacking? Why is it that we cannot share the research behind this epidemic or pandemic now? And now they're talking about epidemic, pandemic, all of that. Guys, there's so much knowledge out here, and so much speculation, and so much conspiracies all in one. You've got to be able to go in a bucket and see what is the truth, what's going on. So COVID is real, just like a flu is real. These are code names. So it is absolutely there, because it's affecting each and every one of you in one ways or another. So can you all be smart? Stop some of the most unimportant, unproductive things that you're doing in your lives. Take some time, get to find out what that's about. Push your legislators to order researches and give you the findings and publish the findings openly, so that you are better informed about these things. We talk about the death toll, which is a huge big deal. I was actually looking for the numbers, the African numbers, so that it's in the context of Africa, but somehow I lost my notes, because I really wanted to give you I had done research for that, and it's not coming on my computer. However, the African CDC is busy doing what they can do best, but in whose interest is it actually doing all this work? So much is being done, but on whose interest primarily? And it's really necessary that you guys get to really find out. Okay, I think I may have just found my numbers that I wanted to share with you. So currently, Africa has 10,099,000, almost. They almost have 10.1 million of COVID-19 cases. That's what they are saying. The death toll has been more than 231,000 people have died in the whole entire Africa. So again, if you do the ratio from 10 million to just 200,000, do the ratio, guys. These things matter of where your priorities should be. If you have more people recovering on their own than those who are dying. What's the secret sauce? How is it that they're recovering? Out of the 10 million, 10.1 million, 9 million, close to 9 million, they have recovered themselves without even being given any sort of shot, any sort of medicine, any sort of vaccination. Listen carefully. Out of 10.1, close to 9, let's say 9.9, because that's what the digits are. I just didn't read it all. 9.0, my apologies. 9.0 or 8.9 of out of 10 million. They recover themselves. How is it that we have yet to find researchers that actually tell us, hey, we have followed this population from these various countries. If you get infected with COVID, this is what's happening. We have to be able to find ways to actually communicate some of these things to our people. And stop doing copy and paste. Just because the United States says do this because it's working in the United States, it does not mean that it's going to work in Africa. Just because the UK says that it's working here at home, it doesn't mean that it's going to work in Africa. It may work, but there's a chance that if it doesn't work and you're doing copy and paste, you will never get to know why it's not working in your own homelands. So there is a need for you all African scientists, those of you who are smart, to get dirty, roll your sleeves, and figure out what's happening with this whole COVID business. They talk about different variants coming through and its impact towards the people. What are you doing towards all of this? How does it relate to your everyday lifestyle? How does it relate to the lockdown that most of you have been experiencing? How does it relate to government actually now exerting more forces, becoming tyrannies as an opportunity to hush people like us speaking up against some of these changes of which must take place? Again, there's something important that I want you to know, and it's funny, but it's also not funny. Did you know that in Rwanda, and I keep on giving Rwanda as one of the examples because I follow Rwanda, I am scrutinizing the country, I pay attention to it, that's my homeland as well. I've seen goats with masks. Just think about it. A human being, we are told that we gotta pull masks on. I've seen people pulling masks on goats and sheep in Rwanda. This is no joke. And I'm not blogging. Can you imagine you taking your dog, your sheep, your chicken, your whatever, and you start putting masks on? What are the consequences of these animals with COVID-19? Are there any researchers? Some of these things, when they take in place, it may seem funny, but it's actually not funny because psychologically it's passing on another message. You have Rwanda locking down the country, the people, but yet allowing tourism, allowing everybody else from the outside to come in the country when an average citizen cannot move outside of their own home. A foreigner comes at home in Rwanda and they can go about their business, especially that the country wants money. How is it fair if you really care about the locals that you will deny your own citizens certain rights, but you actually freely giving it to others? Wake up, people. Whose interests are these leaders looking after? Is it your direct interest or other people's interest? When we say these things, we are not instigating hate. We are not instigating anything that is bad. But we want you to realize, smell the coffee and check out the reality and see what's happening. Because it is happening under your watch. You're just ignorant about it. Moving on, because there's so much to say about coronavirus, about the death toll, about the ratio, about the inadequacy in the research and development on the disease itself, documentation of which is classified, knowledge base that has been exclusive to the few. And there is an audacity to ask a person who do not know, who have not read, who hasn't been properly briefed, telling them to go ahead and vote yes, to go ahead and give the arm and be vaccinated. Go ahead and encourage and beat and do this and that to other people who will not comply. We're killing ourselves. Hear me out. I am for vaccination publicly. I can be the first one to tell you. But I am for educating also, providing the full, disclose everything. Disclose everything, both the pros and cons, the benefit and the consequences, especially short and long consequences towards vaccination, towards the disease itself, towards the livelihood of the people. Open the liability, open lawsuits, allow the people to sue you, the doctor, the government, the industry that is providing the so-called research, the so-called solution. Take away the immunity so that we can actually share the consequences, because you are not sharing the profit. COVID-19 industry, it's going to become a $1 trillion industry today. $1 trillion, not a billion, $1 trillion industry. Who's gaining all that money? Young people, get to research that. It's critical that you get to find out about that. There is more to say. We would just have to break it down next time so we can actually give you some very carefully researched data, some of which we have right now. But it's unconscionable what's happening right now, and we allowing it all to happen. Last but not the least, let's move on to building back Africa. We are Africans and African descendants when it comes to building back Africa. Guys, this is one thing that actually has it's one of the consequences. It is one of the driving force. It is one of the reason being that I am speaking right now. I want to see in Africa built for what it is, for its full potential. I want to see every African country living to its fullest potential, the very fullest potential that it can reach. But we cannot get to do that if we don't become the driving force, the stakeholders in these initiatives. Because as long as others are driving the agenda, are driving the research, the development, the management, the interest will never be yours and mine, primarily. It's always going to be outsiders. While there's nothing wrong with getting some interest where the interest is found, I want you all to know that it's rightfully yours before it's theirs. They're not sharing their own interests in their own homeland with you today, are they? And you certainly don't have the same access as they have with you in your homeland today, do you? So young people, invest in your own countries, invest in your own communities, invest in your own villages. Do it today. There is some good news. There is an article that I landed on, which really made me happy. And this article came from one of these articles from TechPoint Africa. It was published by Nwokoma Chimgozirim. I hope I didn't butcher your name, Nwokoma. This is one of the it's one of the magazine in Nigeria, and it said the African startup raised 1 million every 2 hours in 2021, which means they were billions of dollars in liquid money that was injected in Africa towards the development. This was specifically in tech industry. Now, why am I bothering saying this? While there is an investment, while people are actually realizing that, hey, we need to get in Africa, we need to do something in there. Who are these investors? Sadly to say, most of the investors are outsiders. It is not us, Africans. While it's amazing and it's great that these things are taking place, but Africans are not doing it. Again, if you are not in charge of your own vehicle, if someone else takes charge of your vehicle and they take all the initiatives, they will also call the shots. There will be the decision making at any given point. Every milestone that you reach, they will benefit first before you benefit. And so, young people, invest in yourselves, your communities, organizations. Form your organization, and actually use your own natural resources to start these initiatives, to inject into these ideas. You don't always have to take the money from the West, from Europe, from Asia to develop yourself. I mean, up to this day, why is it that you cannot make your own form of exchange in the natural resources that is right underneath of your own house? Why do you have to go and beg for money in these countries? Money with high interest, most of which has to benefit the people first when they come at home to implement those projects. Again, I'm going to give you a homework. For every dollar that's invested in Africa, that's being given to you as a loan or donation, what is the percentage of that dollar that is actually being to go towards that project? Go and study that, young people. Out of every $100 that you're using for every project that that's been funded from the outside, how much of that $100 is actually being used towards that project? Go and find out the rest of the money that's actually being used to feed the stakeholders on the outside. You are going to be shocked. But you become liable to the entire loan. I want you all to know that that's what's happening. If you get $100 billion today in loans to save, let's say, to build a dam, I want you to know that that $100 million would not be fully used for the dam. A little bit of that will be used. The rest of it will be given to the outsiders, mostly where the money came from. They will bring the organization, the people, the resources to consume that same amount of money and then leave something behind and say, here you go. When today you can finance every single one of the projects that you can dream of using your own natural resources. Today you can develop, you can refine, you can use your own natural resources as sons and daughters and African descendants in and outside of African continent. You can have the leftover enough to feed the entire planet. Only and only if you decide to take action. Be the manufacturer, be the engineer, be the salesperson, and be the distributor. But until you realize that the kitchen is yours to manage, it's not someone else's business, someone else's responsibility to manage, you are always going to starve. Guarantee. So guys, there's so much to say about all of this, and I want to call you out again and say, come and let's discuss openly and frankly speaking and boldly speaking and with no apologies. We are going to do this until change arrives, and the change that we intend to see happening. It is our responsibility that this take place, that you actually take part in it. Gone are the days where you are going to take the blame and throw it on these countries. While they have so much to be blamed for, in this 2022, we wish to see each and every one of us taking responsibility for our own lives, both at home in Africa and outside of Africa. Wherever you may reside, wherever you may be right now, take responsibility of your own lives. Stop blaming these other countries for your mischiefs or for your misery. Whatever part that they have taken in your misery, put an end to that. Say no to it. So at least you can actually release them from their misery. We are so accustomed to blame it on the colonizers continuously and endlessly. And that's the song that we sing so well as Africans. But what role are you playing in it today? What is your role today in making the changes necessary for your misery to be uprooted, to be eradicated? If you have yet to take action, if you have yet to roll up your sleeves and do something about it, I humbly request that you stop blaming all these other nations that have definitely and most certainly have had a hand in it. Start with you. Start with your community. Start with your family. Start with your country. And certainly let's start with Africa and solve our own problems as Africans. I am confident we are going to get there. I am confident that we are going to get there. But all of us, all of you need to be a part of it. And it is in this spirit that I humbly say, thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Be sure to shoot us a message. Give us some feedbacks. There's so much to say. There's so much to do. And we want you to come and have a saying in it as a people, wherever it is you may be. In particular, sons and daughters, African descendants, wherever you may be. We are so excited to let you know that HMG Network, with so many affiliates, have given us airtime throughout this whole 2020 to voice our opinions, to raise issues that you care mostly about, to speak on behalf of the voiceless all over Africa. If you are an advocate, if you do advocacy work, if you are a human rights activist, if you are an activist of some sort, we want to get in touch with you. Check us out on afridominion.com. Shoot us an email on info@afridominion.com and let us know that, hey, help me out. I have these things, this thing happening. Come and support us. There are resources allocated for that. But we also want those of you who actually have the means to come and support us. Come and support it so we can be able to move on to the next step. There are 3 stages in having changes, any kind of change that you may want. First, you have to be able to have information, provide information, which is what we're doing right now. We're sharing information. We want to be able to raise our wellness on everything that we are doing. Afterwards, we want to be able to go back to that information and we do our very best to comprehend it, to see whether there's any added value, any value out of that information. Third stage, we want to take that information that you have understood and then put into some use, put into a good use of it. We intend to do all of that. So ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for watching. Those of you watching straight from social media, thank you kindly. We want to give you an invitation to come in and support, come in and speak, and have a saying in all the issues that we have. Those of you listening from the radio station, from those of you watching from television, we are so humbled, we are so thankful, we are so grateful that you are there. Until next week, when we get to meet, I am Freeman Singirankabo with AfriDominion show, and thank you so much for HMG Network and affiliates for broadcasting this live all over the world and on social medias all over Africa and the rest of the world. So until next week, I am Freeman Singirankabo. So long.